Well, here we are in week 3 of our series, Imago Dei. And remember, Imago Dei means what? Image of God. And the reason that we're using this title, Imago Dei, is so that we sound fancy. No, the reason that we're using this title, Imago Dei, is because the title itself, the words itself, this is Latin words for image of God, there is much weight in this idea. And we've been trying to unwrap some of that weight for you. And I started 2 weeks ago, I started our series, and I read for you some things, some news items that kind of demonstrate where we are as a society and what we're experiencing in the way of confusion in the world that we live in today. And let me read another one for you that is not that old, just several months ago. This is back in November that I found this. And it's from the UK Telegraph. So remember, when we're talking about what's going on in our world and our society and what we're facing, we're not just talking about what's taking place in our country. We know that that's crazy, but this is a worldwide thing that's happening. It says this: a randy 69-year-old Dutch man is waging a desperate court battle to drop 20 years off his life in order to boost his chances on Tinder. If you don't know what Tinder is, it's a dating website, but it's not the best dating website. I'll just leave it there. Emil Rattleband, 69, an entrepreneur and a self-help guru, was born March 1949, but wants to legally change his birth certificate to show that he was born in 1969. Quote, "I have done a doctor's checkup, and what does it show?" Rattleband said in an interview with the outlet. "My biological age is 45 years. When I'm 69, I'm limited. If I'm 49, then I can buy a new house, drive a different car, I can take up more work. When I'm on Tinder and it says I'm 69, I don't get an answer. When I'm 49, with the face I have, I will be in a luxurious position." In an interview with the Dutch language De Telegraaf, he calls himself, quote, "a young God who wanted to become a father again." He compared his situation to the plight of transgender people. Quote, "Transgenders can now have their gender changed on their birth certificate, and in the same spirit, there should be room for an age change," he told the Telegraph. So, if you didn't catch all that, here's a 69-year-old man that wants to officially change his age to 49 because he feels that that's what he is. He doesn't feel 69, he feels 49, and because that's what he feels like, then that's what should be on his birth certificate. And I say, yeah. Seriously, if we're going to allow gender change, then we're going to have to open up the door for things like age change and race change. By the way, I'm kind of feeling Hawaiian today. And but see, folks, this is where we're going. And if we want to follow the logical progression of where these things lead, this is where it goes. And you say, well, that's ridiculous. Well, but it follows the reasonable pursuit of where we're at. This is where we are at in a society. And when we bring these things up, we look at them and we go, man, how do we answer these issues? Can we answer, as Christians, can we answer these issues? Are there answers for us as Christians from the Bible? I mean, thousands of years old this book is, and we're facing some of these really difficult and different types of issues. So can we really hope to find answers within this book? And what we have been trying to lay the groundwork for is that, yes, we can. And we have been taking the last few weeks of just trying to build first the foundation before we jump out into some of these issues. So let's review a little bit first before we move on today. When we began this series, we said that we needed to start at the beginning. And literally, we meant at the beginning. And so we started with the very first sentence of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And if you remember, I told you back when we started going over this, that that's not just the most significant verse in all of the Bible. It is the most significant verse in the universe. Because if that statement is true, it is packed full of information. It tells us where we came from. That we came from a creator God. That God decided to make us. That's what it tells us. And implied in that statement, we also discovered that there is a reason to believe that this creator is a designer as well, because we look around us, and if he created it all, we see design in it, which makes him the designer. We moved on from there and said that if God's creator and designer, according to that statement, then that is also implied in there that he is purpose giver. See, when you make something, when you create something, you do it for a reason. There is a purpose. And since God is best, then his purposes are best. His design is best. See? So as we looked at this and as we opened up this time, we said that this statement tells us that God is creator, designer, purpose giver. And if we just stopped right there, then we could say, man, look, if God is creator, designer, purpose giver, then we can trust his directives for us, his commands to us. We can trust them even, get this, when we don't understand them. Because if we understand that he is creator, he is designer, he has purpose, he is best, and so his design is best and his purpose is best, then even if we don't understand his commands and his directives, we say, man, I don't quite get this, but I know he's these things, then I can trust him with confidence, even though I don't have it all figured out. And let me say this too. If those things are true, if that first statement of Genesis is true, and what is implied there is that he is creator, he is designer, he is purpose giver, if we just stopped right there, you would have enough information to begin to unpack for yourself some of these difficult issues that we've been talking about. I mean, it'd be a little bit harder because we haven't developed some things further, but if you had just that, and you were able to do a little bit of hard thinking, you would be able to work through some of these issues that we're talking about. What we've been trying to relay over these last couple weeks as we lay the groundwork for these tough issues is that as we look at these things in our society, you need more than just a picture of God. You need more than just to believe that there is a God. That's important for sure. But what you and I need is a big picture of God. A huge picture of God. Because hopefully you're beginning to understand that is what he is. It's important to believe that he's there, but you've got to understand his immensity, his magnitude, his magnificence. Because then when you start getting a conception of God as big as you can possibly conceptualize him, then it's going to help in dealing with some of these issues. And from there, last week, Clinton moved on to expand that picture a little bit more and move us into this idea of being made in the image of God. Genesis 1:26 and 27 is the foundation for this, and it says this, "Then God said, 'Let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the grounds.' So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them." We are told 3 separate times in those 2 verses that we are created in the image of God. Clint started working on just what that means and why that's important. And here's our definition. Imago Dei, image of God, is the imprint of God's character on humanity that enables us to reflect His glory and represent His authority in relationship to God, each other, and nature. And that's all in those verses, and I want to show you that. The important words in there are reflect, represent, and relationship. And here it is in these verses. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. That's reflection. God said, we are going to create humans different from everything that I have already created, from all other creatures. Man will be different in that he will image, he will reflect me. That's reflection. Then it says, they will reign over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry on the ground. That's representation. They will reign. God says, I'm going to give man not just my image, the ability to reflect me, I am going to also give him authority. I'm going to give him authority over the rest of creation. That's representation. Man will represent me to the rest of creation. It goes on, says, so God created human beings in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. That's relationship. And actually, if we pulled that apart a little bit more, relationship in those verses is actually threefold. It's relationship with God. God made us to be able to have a relationship with Him, unlike any other creature there is. God made us to have relationship with each other in a deep and meaningful way. And God made us to have relationship with nature. And that's all in those verses. And we're going to unpack that more and more as we move through our series together. But that is all involved in what this image is. Humanity has been set apart from the rest of every other created being. Now, Clinton touched on this last week. It's impossible to totally even know all there is that's involved in image, in Imago Dei, because it's impossible to know everything about God. But we do our best to try to figure it out. And in order to help you with this, I want to park a little bit here on the word reflection, because that's the key, right? And I think for me, the best thing that illustrates reflection is a mirror. I'm stealing this little illustration from my lovely wife. But a mirror is made to reflect. It's made to show image. And God created man to be a reflector. And so as man reflects God outward, he represents God to the rest of creation with that authority that was given, that dominion, and in relationship. But only as man is aligned with God can he do that properly. You say, Rand, how does he do that? How does this work? How does man reflect? And I know it's kind of freaky as I carry this around, you're going to see your face. But I had it sitting right in front of me during worship. That was really freaky. But so I'm just spreading the love. How does that work? What does that look like? Well, like I said, there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of parts that we don't know. We do know mentally. Mentally, we reflect God's image. What does that mean? Well, we can reason. We reason and we can think like no other creature that's created. We have the ability to choose rationally between things. And because of that, we're unique in creation. That is an endowment of God's image on us. It's the Imago Dei. So what that means is that every time something is invented, every time there's a math equation that's worked out, anytime a book is written, it is a picture of the Imago Dei. That's what that means. Also, not just mentally, but morally. See, God has implanted in us his image morally. We have a conscience. We have something that tells us that things are right or things are wrong. Now, that conscience can be programmed in a wrong way to give the wrong results, but nevertheless, we have this conscience that is different and unique from any other created being. What does that mean? Where do we see that demonstrated? Well, anytime a law to right a wrong is written, that's a picture of Imago Dei. Every time good is applauded or promoted, that's Imago Dei. That's a picture of the image of God. That is man being that image. And then there's that social reflection. We reflect God mentally, morally, socially. What does that mean? That means God has equipped and imprinted on us the ability to have relationship like no other creature. And I know what some of you are saying, but I have a dog and we love each other. And I'm sure you do. But there is a limit to that affection. That it's real love, there's no doubt. But that animal cannot love you the way that a human can. We are equipped emotionally to love and demonstrate affection in a unique way above any other creature. And it's the image of God that allows us to do that. It's the Imago Dei. What does that mean? What does that look like? That means when someone marries, when someone hugs a child, when someone cares for a sick relative. That is Imago Dei. That is the reflection of this great God who created us. Does that make sense? That's what we're talking about. That's the beauty of this. You and I are unique in this aspect as people. And we're going to be expanding this every time we look at an issue. These are the things that we're going to jump back to because this is what makes it so vital. This is how we can answer a guy like Emil, whatever his name was, from Holland, who wants to take 20 years off of his life and say, dude, listen, here's the problem with that. And I'm not going to give you the answer now, but we will in a few weeks. But these are the things that we're going to jump back to. And again, if you're processing what we're saying, I think some of you are already beginning to go, hey, I kind of see where some of these answers might be. I kind of see where we're going. But what I'd like to do today in the rest of our time together, I want to just lay a few more bricks on this idea of Imago Dei and maybe just add a little more color to the picture. And we're just going to look at two main things this morning. I want to look at the perspective of Imago Dei and then the problem of Imago Dei. So if you have your notes this morning, that first point there, the perspective. Perspective has to do with our view of things, what we see and how we see it. When we understand this concept of Imago Dei, it will affect the way we view several things. And here's the first one. Understanding Imago Dei affects my view of God. When I understand that out of all of creation, God endowed people to be his image bearers, that should affect my view of God. To imprint people with his image is a sign of God's pleasure and his love. I was thinking about this, and I was trying to think of a way to help you understand what this entails. And I was reminded of my grandfather, my mom's dad. He was a very talented man, and one of the talents that he had is he was a very good carpenter. He wasn't a very good teacher. He was one of those guys that when you hung around him, he wouldn't explain how to do things. He would just do them, and he expected that you would catch on to what he was doing. Well, when he started doing a project, I always wanted to be around. I wanted to see what he was doing. I wanted to watch him at work because he was really good at what he did. And he would involve me in some of his projects. And I remember one project in particular, he was remodeling the kitchen in his home. And so every chance I got, man, I was there and I was a part of that project and I was watching what he did. And I knew enough not to ask questions because that usually didn't get very good responses. He wasn't a very patient man. But he didn't mind me being there, and he would always give me things to do. And as long as I did what he said, everything went smooth and the project went well. And I remember we worked on this project, and every day I would come in and it would develop a little bit further. And I think that's why I really liked it, because you saw progress, you know? And it was like, wow, this is really coming together. And putting countertops in and changing windows and fixing the walls. And I remember we were near the end of the project one day, and there were these panels that needed to be put on above the counter, and they needed to be glued on, and there was these big panels, and we measured and we cut, and we were getting ready to put in the panels, and my grandfather pulled out this big tube of some kind of glue, and he began to put that glue on the back of those panels. But I noticed he wasn't just throwing it on there. He started writing something, and he was writing his name with the glue. And then he handed me the tube, and he said, now you put your name on there. So I moved down to the blank spot, and I wrote my name on there. I got all done. He said, all right, now we're going to put that up there, and when somebody takes this down someday, they're going to know who put it together, because it's got our names on it. My grandfather, if you knew him, would not have put his name on something he wasn't pleased with and felt proud of. He put his name on there and slapped that piece of panel on there because this is my work. I'm proud of it, and it's worthy to have my name be a part of it. Folks, the idea that God has made us in his image is a stamp of approval that says, I am proud of what I've done, and I love what I've done, and I find pleasure in what I've done. Do you see how this idea of Imago Dei, the image of God, when we understand that he's created us in his image, it changes our view of him? He's not this austere, harsh, angry God ready to smash us. He's a God who designed us in his image. It's a beautiful picture. It's a beautiful way to see this creator God. It will absolutely change the way you worship him, because you don't worship him out of fear of being punished, but you worship him out of the awe that he lovingly created me. Well, understanding Imago Dei not just changes my view of God, it changes, number two, my view of me. An understanding of Imago Dei affects my view of who I am. I want you to think about it for a minute. When the creator of the universe wanted to create something in his image, something more like him than anything else in the universe, he created you, me. God's image on us means we're valuable. We bear his image. We have dignity. We have purpose. I'm not just a random chance happening of the evolutionary model. Who knows why I'm here? It's just a chance that you're here and you'll one day die and go back to nothingness. No, I have been made by a designer God who created me because he found purpose and joy in doing so. And that changes my view of him, but it certainly should change my view of me. See, the problem is we're trying to feed people, we're trying to feed kids in our school and our systems all about self-image, but we're building it on something that really is nothing. And we've got to build it on substance. You are valuable and worthy and honorable because God has imprinted his image on you. You are Imago Dei. And that makes all the difference in the world on who you are. You heard Kurt read just a few minutes ago out of Psalm 8. Let me read again just a few verses 3 through 6. The psalmist says, when I look at the night sky and I see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think anything about them? Human beings that you should care for them. What's the psalmist doing here? He's looking at the universe and kind of some of the things that Clinton was bringing out last week that's just so vast and so huge and so massive. And yet even in the whole scope of the creation story, it's like God created the stars. It's like an afterthought. And yet when we look at it, we realize, wow, the universe is so huge and so big. And so the psalmist says, man, and remember, this was in days before the Hubble telescope and before any of the incredible pictures that we have now. This is just a guy who could look up into the sky and see the thousands upon thousands of stars and know that the universe has got to be big. But even in his mind, it wasn't as big as we know that it is. But he came to the point where he said, man, when I look at that and then I look at us, I go, well, God, why would you even worry about us? We're just puny compared to all that. But then where he goes from there, listen. Yet you have made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority. The psalmist is blown away here. He goes, man, I look up in the sky and see how big it is, how massive it is, how incredible it is. And then I look at us as people and I go, man, we're just puny nothings. And yet I'm reminded, wait a minute, no, the God of the universe that created this massive universe put his image on us and gave us the opportunity to reflect him and to have authority over all the things that he's created. That's amazing stuff. That is who you are. That is who I am. And so this idea of Imago Dei, it should change the way that you view yourself. Because as you view yourself in this way, you understand that you are a valuable individual. Not just because you are, but because you have Imago Dei, the image of God. So, another illustration. I'm using a 20 because I didn't have anything bigger. This is valuable. This holds value. $20 worth of value. Now, I did a little research. The paper that this is printed on, it's not normal paper. It's not made out of, normally paper is made out of some kind of wood fiber from trees or plants or that kind of thing. The paper that money is printed on is made out of cotton and linen. It's literally a type of cloth. We call it paper, but it's really kind of cloth. And the reason they do that is because it gets all wrinkled up and stuffed in places, and it's got to be able to last. The paper is referred to many times because it's more of a cloth than it is a paper. It's called rag paper. Aren't you glad you come to church? I teach you stuff that you would never get anywhere else. Rag paper. If you bought plain rag paper, it would cost a little bit more than regular paper. Not much, but it is worth a little bit more if you bought just plain rag paper. Now let's suppose that I went into Friendly Market and I had a piece of rag paper cut in the shape of a $20 bill, but just the paper. And I went in, I picked up a bunch of groceries, and I went to the checkout. And when I went to checkout, I handed the cashier my piece of rag paper. She might look at it and go, well, this is interesting. And I would tell her, it's rag paper. Now, what do you suppose she'd say? Oh, well, in that case, of course I'll take it for the exchange of the groceries that you have. Are you kidding? She's going to look at me and go, oh, Holly boy, come out with some real money. She ain't going to take no plain piece of paper to pay for what I've got. She's going to say, look, go back and find some real money. And wait a minute, you don't understand. This is the paper that money is printed on. I don't understand why you won't take it. You know why she won't take it? Because it has not been imprinted with the images that it needs in order to hold its value. You get the picture? You're not just special because you are. You are special and valuable because you have Imago Dei. You have been imprinted with the image, the impression of the God of the universe. That's what makes you valuable. That's what makes me valuable. And so when we look at this idea of Imago Dei, it needs to change our view of who we are. I'm not dumb. I'm Imago Dei. I'm not ugly. I'm Imago Dei. I'm not useless. I'm Imago Dei. I'm not unworthy. I'm Imago Dei. Changes the way I view I'm not great just because I am. I am great because I've been made in the image of the great God. See how that changes the way that you view yourself. You go, well, how can that be valuable? Raise your children to understand that they are Imago Dei. Raise your grandchildren to understand they are Imago Dei. You are special because God created you different from every other created thing. He has stamped on you value because you have Imago Dei. Isn't that great? See, when I understand Imago Dei, it affects the way that I view God. It affects the way that I view me. And number 3, understanding Imago Dei changes my view of you. See, because when I begin to understand that Imago Dei is stamped on me, but that God created all humanity to have Imago Dei, then I realize, no, wait a minute. You are Imago Dei too. So that begins to change my outlook and the way that I treat you because I see you differently than just another mass of molecules and flesh. You are Imago Dei. James used this idea when he wrote his letter in James chapter 3. He's talking about the way we misuse our tongue, our words. Listen to what he says. No one can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil and full of deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those, listen, who have been made in the image of God. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. What is James saying? James doesn't simply say, hey, don't say bad things about other people. He's saying, look, I'm going to link your words toward others with the fact that they are Imago Dei. They're created in the image of God. You cannot curse someone and praise God at the same time because you don't understand. The person you're cursing is Imago Dei. They're created in God's image. So when you curse them in a very real way, you're cursing God. That's what he's saying. When I look at you and I downgrade you and I put you down, you are Imago Dei. I am doing that as if I am doing it to God himself. Because you have been created in God's image. Let me go a step further. In Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, let me read this for you. I was just going to refer to it, but I think it would be more effective if I just read it to you. In Genesis 9:6, the flood is over, and Noah and his family are going to be repopulating the earth. And so God's giving them some basic rules. And he says in verse 6, if anyone takes human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. Why? For God made human beings in his own image. What's he saying there? God's saying, look, humanity is so valuable because it carries my very image that if someone murders someone else, then that person has forfeited their life because they have violated Imago Dei. They have violated my image in that other person. Do you see how important this is in God's eyes? That we are created in his image? We not only are we not supposed to murder each other, we're not supposed to curse each other, because in doing that, we literally come up against the very image of God implanted in us. This is huge, folks. Because it deals with the way that I view you, the way that I treat you. You say, wait a minute. Wait a minute, Rand. There's a lot of messed up people out there. There's a lot of really screwy people out there. I mean, I'm supposed to take this concept and view even messed up people out there as Imago Dei? Yep. Let's go back to my $20 bill. Valuable? Yes. Why? Not because it's rag paper, but because it has an image that makes it valuable. But what if I take this valuable piece of rag paper imprinted with image, and I do this? Is it still valuable? Has it lost any of its $20 value? No. If I was to offer it to you, I doubt very much anybody in here would go, no, I don't want it because it's wrinkled. You'd be going, oh, pizza cafe, yeah, I'll take them. Right? Because it's still valuable. It's still, what if I throw it down on the ground and you go, it lost value right there. About 10, it's only worth $10 now, right? Because I crumbled it and I threw it on the ground, stepped on it. It's only worth $10 now, right? No, it's still valuable. What happens if I picked it up and I spit on it? I'm not gonna. But what if I did? You go, well, I'd be a little reluctant to take it, but it's still worth $20. Yeah, it's wrinkled, it's been stomped on, it's been spit on, but it hasn't lost its value just because of what it's gone through. People get crumbled up by the circumstances of life. They get stomped on by sin. They get spit on by the enemy. And they walk around crumpled, stomped on, and spit on. But they're still Imago Dei. They are still made in the image of God. What does that mean? What does that look like? The person in the store who's rude and obnoxious? Imago Dei. The person while you're driving down the road who's writing on your bumper, who could be me, Imago Dei. That little baby across the aisle in the airplane throwing a fit, making your trip miserable, Imago Dei. That person who constantly annoys you and bugs you could be your spouse. Imago Dei. Do you see how this changes everything? It really changes everything. Because if I am constantly reminded that the people that I deal with, those that I love, those that annoy me, those that make me mad, they are still people created in the image of God, it changes everything. It changes my view of how I deal with them. Imago Dei is about the core of our identity, There may be other things that attach themselves to us because of sin and the circumstances of life, but at the core of every single person's identity, they are made in the image of God. They are Imago Dei. And I'm trying to give you an overload on illustrations this morning because I want you to understand how vitally important this is, because we're getting ready to go into some really thick weeds. And if you don't have this down, you're not going to make it through the other side. I mentioned to you that Louise and I just got back from this trip. Came back on Wednesday. And on our trip, there were several occasions when we were asked to show our ID, an official document that verifies who you are, right? Well, there are different types of ID. There are driver's licenses, passports, state ID cards. No matter what type of ID it is, they all have something in common. They all must bear your image, your picture. It's that picture that's used to verify who you are. It validates you. Here's the reality. You and I and everybody else in the world, wherever we go, we carry ID. Imago Dei. It's who we are. It's the core of our identity. It's not what we have. Listen very carefully. It's not what we have. It's who we are. Big difference. It is our ID. You and I are Imago Dei. So, what does that mean? That means the next time someone says to you, sir, ma'am, I need to see some ID. Then you can look at them and say, well, you're looking at it right here. I am Imago Dei. ID. Are you getting this? Are you getting it? This is so absolutely vital that you understand. This, if you will understand where this will take you, it will change everything about the way you do everything with people. It'll change the way you deal with your own children, your grandchildren, the people next door, the people that you work with, because we all are Imago Dei. As we finish, let's talk about the problem. There is a problem. This is great stuff, and it's good. We can find great worth in understanding who we are and who the other person is and better understand who God is, but there is a problem. And the problem's called sin, right? So, I've been created to reflect God. Mentally, morally, socially. God's given me the opportunity to rule, and we're going to talk more about what that means in future weeks, but to represent His authority on earth. But there is a problem. The problem is sin has entered the picture. In Genesis 1 and 2, we see the beauty of this Imago Dei, this creation that God made, and us being the crown of that creation with His image. We see that, but when we get to chapter 3, everything goes south because sin enters the picture. And you say, well, how does sin affect this? Because we just talked about messed up people. We know there's messed up people. Of course, there's none in here, but we know there's a lot of messed up people out there, right? So how do we reconcile the messed up world with this idea that we are Imago Dei? Well, sin has done two things, and I was trying to think how to explain it. Clint and I have been talking about this for a couple weeks. Sin has affected us. Would you put this down on that first bullet point? It's altered the direction of our reflection. And let me explain what I mean. If I am created and you are created and all of humanity was created to reflect the image of God. In order for a mirror to reflect what it needs to reflect, it needs to be directed in the right direction. It needs to be facing the right direction. In order for you and me as created beings who have been made uniquely in the Imago Dei, we need to be directed toward God. What sin did was it changed our direction. Now, instead of imaging God, too many times we image other things, other people. See, because ultimately what happens is what we image many times is what we idolize, what we end up worshiping. Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, we don't have time to go into all of it this morning, but in your C3 groups this week, that's some of what you'll be exploring a little bit more, verses 18 and following. But in Romans chapter 1, it tells us that there's this digression with man. It says in verse 18, God shows his anger from heaven against all sinful, wicked people who suppress the truth of their wickedness. Why? They know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. In fact, many translations say obvious in them. What does that mean? That is referring to the fact that we are created in the image of God. We have this sense to know, just looking around. Humanity is different. We function different than any other created thing. There is something special and unique about us. That's the Imago Dei. That's what this is talking about. They know the truth about God because he had made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, and his divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks, and they wouldn't worship him as God. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. Listen, as a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools. And instead of worshiping the glorious ever-living God, they worshiped idols made to look like mere humans and birds and animals and reptiles. Why? Because they no longer were directed toward the God of the image that they carried, but they began to be directed toward the things around them. And the things around them become God. I begin to live for my job, my money, my house, my spouse, my kids. I begin to find value in worth in the things that have been created instead of the Creator that I image. Do you see how that works? And so what's happened? What's happened to us? Sin has come in and it's altered the direction of our reflection. And here's the second bullet point. Sin has altered the clarity of our reflection. So not only has the direction of our reflection been altered, but now the very thing that is supposed to reflect, the mirror itself, has been soiled, tarnished, dirty. You can see in other people. It's not that we don't still carry the image of God. You can see it in other people. Like we said, when something is invented, when a math equation is done, or someone gets married, or a child is loved, or something good is done in society. Those are all reflections of God's image, but they've been muddied, they've been tarnished, they're not clear because our direction has been altered. And we've been muddied in the way that we can reflect. And so what does that mean? That means that we are walking Imago Dei that aren't doing what we have been designed and created to do. And what happens when you take something that's designed to do something one way and you use it to do something else with it? It normally breaks. It normally doesn't work the way that it should. It's not efficient anymore. Oh, you may be able to pound nails with your laptop computer and get a few pounded into that piece of wood, but eventually something's going to give because the laptop wasn't made to pound nails. See, when something is created for one thing and it begins to be used for something else, something breaks. Folks, we live in a broken world of misdirected reflections and soiled reflections of Imago Dei. That's why we need a rescuer. That's why we need the master builder to step in to change the direction of our reflection and to clean up our soiled reflection. And that's exactly what God did through Jesus. God sent his Son to redirect us and to clean us up so that we could be the Imago Dei we were created to be. So that we would begin to understand that anything else we give value and validity to that should only go to God will eventually break us, will eventually destroy our society. Because we have this Creator God who loved us so much that when he created us, he implanted his Imago Dei on us. He's given us design and purpose. And even when that got screwed up, he sent his Son to rescue us, to get us back to where we need to be. That is Imago Dei. That is the beauty of who I am, who you are, and how God wants us to live. Amen? Amen. So, Father, we come before you today.